United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the list has to do with our reval. Judith and Pat are here with John Walham from the Real Properties. Judith, you want to introduce? You want to get us started?
Sure. We have John Walham here from the state today. He's going to talk about our reassessment for this upcoming year and the process and how we're going to do our data collection and how we're going to move forward. Get everything completed by October 1st. And without further ado, John.
Hey. Hi, everyone. I'm John Walham with the Office of Real Property Tax Services. We're a division of the New York State Department of Tax and Finance. We deal exclusively with property tax administration. So, first of all, I want to thank the board for having me here, but also for embarking on the reassessment. The town had been maintaining a level of assessment of 100% for a considerable period of time and is now looking to resume that. Very briefly, what I would simply say about reassessment, it's a process along with assessments in general that really doesn't get any love. I would say that the property tax, we don't have anything to do with income tax, but I got to say my personal impression, the property tax is probably even more reviled than income tax. But the bottom line is it serves a very important purpose. Property tax is supposed to be based on market value. So the bottom line is unless the town's assessments, any town's assessments, are in sync with current market value, they reflect value accurately and as of the same point in time, it stands to reason that some properties are going to be paying more than they really should, some less than they really should, and some will be paying about the right amount, sort of by luck of the draw. So with the town looking to resume 100% assessments, I have to say thank you, because what the town is doing is it's doing the utmost it can to ensure that all of its property owners are paying only their fair share of property tax, no more, no less. And that's really what the reassessment process is about. And hopefully other towns in the county will look at Shelter Island and say, well, if Shelter Island can do it, so can we. Relative to the process, as Judith referenced, and she'll talk about this a little more, the assessor's office is now in the process of reviewing property characteristics that it has on file. It's going to be sending out inventory data mailers. Judith will talk about that in a little more detail. What I would say is that all property owners are really partners in this project, because the assessor's office wants to make sure the property characteristics listed on the town's property inventory record cards are accurate and up to date. And the assessor's office will also be reviewing sales information. So there's going to be an effort to make sure that, look, the properties that did sell, A, they were arm's length sales, and B, that the inventory and the condition of the inventory at the time of sale are properly reflected. Because the sales are going to play an important part in the valuation of properties in the town. So that effort, the data verification, we're not really sure how long that's going to take. It could take a month and a half, it could take a little longer. But bottom line, once the inventory is correct and to the satisfaction of Judith and the folks in the assessor's office, then there's going to be what's called some mass appraisal work, which will be an effort to develop values of each property in the town. For residential property, that's typically going to be a comparable sales approach. For non-residential property, that's more than likely to be a cost, possibly an income approach for income-producing properties such as commercials. Once those values are produced, The assessor's office will then be going through a process of reviewing all those values.
How'd you say you do the commercial?
Commercial typically is done through an income approach. It's based on the rentals that conceivably could be generated by the real estate. It does not look at business value. It's strictly the real estate, so that if you have, and I'm making this up now, if you have, let's say, a 2,000 square foot building, what potentially could that building rent for, given its commercial use, whether that's retail or something else? And, that gets capitalized, taking into account expenses, vacancy rates, things like that. So once the mass appraisal work is done, Judith and the assessor's office will be looking at all those value estimates for each property to decide, are these reasonable? Do they need to be adjusted in some way? Coming out of that will be what we would call the preliminary assessments. And then on or about March 1st next year, the goal will be to send out notices that have those new preliminary assessments on them. And at that point, legally, because the town's equalization rate is below 85, property owners will be afforded, I guess what I would call it is an extra bite of the apple. I think everyone's aware that normally in the third Tuesday in May, there's the opportunity to file a grievance if you disagree with your assessment. This will be something known as a period of informal review. So if people get their notice, they have questions about the preliminary assessment, or more importantly, if they disagree with it, and I'm going to assume at that point they think it's too high. I don't think they're going to complain if they feel it's too low. But if it's too high, they will have the opportunity to make an appointment, probably with Judith, perhaps with Pat, to come in, have a sit down for 15, 20 minutes, get an explanation of how the value was arrived at, and also a chance to present anything they feel should be considered in the valuation of their property. Maybe it's not unheard of, maybe they come in with a survey, well, you have me down for 2 acres, it's really only 1 3/4 acres or something like that. Or they might have a sale of a property, well, look, you've got me at this value, here's a sale which is very much like my house, which came in less, so I think you should lower my house. Regardless of the circumstances, there will be a period of informal review.
John, can I interrupt for a second? Just want to say that, this is a big extra step for the office. I mean, it's a lot of work, a lot of time, and it's because we're below 85%. So it's the feeling that the state recognizes by requiring this, that people will get their new assessments that might jump from below 85% to 100%, and, we'll have some tremors. And that people will want to know, information that you're going to present here today about how an increase in assessments, not necessarily an increase in taxes, if all boats are rising, right? But just this idea that to give the public an extra time before the tentative roll comes out.
No, very well said. And I'll segue to that.
Yeah.
That the period for informal review, that would probably be sometime early to mid-March to early to mid-April, with the tentative roll published as it always is on May 1st. And people still have the opportunity to file a grievance if they feel so inclined or if they feel dissatisfied with the outcome of the informal review. And yeah, you said it perfectly. Because the town is at a lower level of assessment, I think it's down around 79 now, which of course isn't at 100, it's reasonable to think, since that 79 represents the average, again, it's an overall average, there could be individual properties that are higher or lower than 79, but the point is that people can reasonably expect their assessments to go up. And the fact that their assessment will go up more than perhaps it might have when the town was maintaining 100%, I don't want people to take that as a cause for alarm or concern. there's a very common misperception that when assessments go up, taxes will go up proportionately, and that's not true. We have a handout, I think all of the board.
Christina, do you have this for the share?
Yeah, we have copies here, certainly.
Yeah, we have the Zoom audience too, John, so Christina's going to try to get it up on the screens here.
Yeah, and certainly this is something that's on the BTF website, so we can
Yes.
give the link, so that could always be posted on the town's website.
That'd be good too.
Yeah, there it is. So here's the thing. Taxes are determined by a number of things, not directly by assessments. Essentially, taxing jurisdictions, which for folks in Shelter Island are going to be the county, the town, and the school district. They have to determine their budget, how much money they need to do their job. Excuse me. Then there's always the question of, well, what revenue is going to be brought in through means other than the property tax? Once that is counted or discounted, the remainder is the levy, the amount to be placed in the property tax. So even regardless of whether a reassessment occurs, there could be changes to people's taxes based on changes to budgets or the levies. There have been times where the budget has stayed the same to the penny, but, well, you don't have a shared school district, so it's not an issue there. But say for the county, if there are changes in the equalization rates, it's possible that even if the budget stays the same, the levies may end up changing, and people can still see differences in their bills. Basically, this little chart, they're just illustrations of different scenarios where assessments can go up and tax bills can decrease, or assessments could stay the same and the bills could go up, or vice versa. What I would say in general, which I would think is the most helpful comment I can offer to property owners in Shelter Island at this time, because of course at this point the reassessment hasn't been done, we don't have values for any property. But what people will really want to look at is when that time comes, what's the average percent change throughout the town? So I'm just going to pick a number arbitrarily. I'm not saying this will be the number. But let's say that assessments go up on average 30% from what they were on the 2023 roll. So that's an important number, because if the average is 30%, if we ignore possible changes due to budgets and levies, that's saying, to use your phrase, if the rising tide lifts all boats 30%, there's really not going to be an appreciable change in the taxes. The question, which is inevitable that this will be the case for some properties, where you have properties where the change is greater than 30%, or if the change is less than 30%, and both those scenarios are probably going to be likely, though we don't know the volume, how many, but where those two situations occur, that suggests that taxes might go up for that individual property owner to the degree the change is higher than 30%, or if the change is less than 30%, property taxes could actually go down. And again, all of that is going to be tempered as well by what happens with the budgets and the tax levies for the taxing jurisdictions. And the first taxes on which the reassessment values would apply would then be the December town, county, and school bills that are traditionally issued. That would be December 4. So again, I would just say to people in general, look, I know that I know property tax is something that's usually a cause for concern. No, I've never met anyone who likes it, say that. Regardless of their ability to pay, nobody likes it. Everybody thinks the money would be better left in their own pocket. And that's a very hard point to argue. But be that as it may, we all have to pay property tax. So the bottom line is, I would just ask people, please don't stress over this. You know, if you want to do something that's helpful to the project, make sure that when you receive the data mailer that Judith is going to speak about, please make sure you respond. If you have questions about your inventory, you think something's inaccurate, please make sure to follow up on that with the assessor's office. And the other thing that you can reasonably do, since of course the assessments are going to be based on property value, is as you have a chance, maybe start looking at other properties, particularly other properties that have sold, and get a sense of what you think your property is really worth. This way you have a benchmark of your own with which to react when you eventually get that letter, let's say early March of next year. And that's going to put you in a position where you can, from an informed perspective, you can react to what you get in that letter. You can say, well, it seems reasonable, or no, I better make an appointment for an informal review. So with that, I can't think of anything else to say. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll let Judith talk a little bit about the data mailers.
Before we leave, this preliminary assessment letter
Right.
that's going to go out to people, correct me, I think I'm remembering this correctly, John, from our conversations. That will include a what if,
Yes,
right? Could you explain the what if?
sure, absolutely. Again, just to give you a context here, as BJ absolutely said accurately, because the town's equalization rate is less than 85, this informal review and these letters, the form name is assessment disclosure notices, these legally have to be sent. So besides providing what your 2023 assessment was, along with your preliminary 2024 value, the letter requires an estimate. It requires a tax estimate. Now, let me explain that, because there is no way that anybody here, myself included, could provide an estimate as to what your taxes would be for the upcoming 2024 bills. We don't know that. The budgets and the levies wouldn't even have been set yet at this point. So what the process requires is the next best thing. Everybody will have presumably received and paid a combined town-county school bill in December of 2023. So what this process does is it says, okay, we know the tax dollar amounts that were raised within Shelter Island for town purposes, for county purposes, and for school district purposes based on those December 2023 bills. So we know the existing assessment, the existing taxable value, and what people actually paid based on those bills. So what's happening here, or what's happening in this process is not a prediction of future taxes. It's a redistribution of those 2023 taxes that people will have already paid using the new preliminary assessments and preliminary taxable values. So it is a what-if situation, as you said. It's meant to say, look, we don't know what'll come down the road in December of 24, but had all of these new preliminary assessments been in effect for December 2023, here's what you actually paid, here's what you would have paid. And that's to give folks a bit of a perspective what the tax impact is. So to bring this full circle with what we were talking about relative to what the average change in the assessments town-wide would be, which again, we don't know. But if we take that arbitrary 30% number, if somebody did have a change of the town-wide average, let's say 30%, they're probably not going to see much of a difference in the way those taxes shake out. Again, the higher that number turns out to be for an individual property above 30%, well, it's possible the taxes could show somewhat higher. If it's less than that town-wide average, regardless of what that number is, people might actually see a decrease to some extent. There again, That's going to be a snapshot in time, because at that point, the town will still have some new construction values that will not be accounted for. And since legally these notices have to be mailed by March 1st, it's also reasonable to think that not everyone who is applying for an exemption will have gotten their application in by the time those letters are produced. So not all tax exemptions may be reflected in that either. So.
Yeah. Great.
Just a question, something like, having grown up in Nassau County, one of the better communities to live in, I think, tax-wise for what you got a bang for your buck, is a place like Garden City. Because Garden City had Roosevelt Field, and it had a huge commercial property with hundreds of stores and massive stores inside of just Roosevelt Field. Plus it had other things, Franklin Avenue and all those other places that had very big department stores as well. A place like Shelter Island that has a very limited commercial area, I would imagine that the balance here is much different, because most of the tax rate is being picked up by the homeowner as opposed to the commercial end. So I just think that's a reality of when you live in a community that has a fairly nominal commercial enterprise, as Shelter Island does, that's an issue. And the other question I had is, or comment was, on a normal year, when we do this reeval and people file for appeals and want to come in, and what would you say, do we get 10%, 5%, 2%, or is it more than?
that.
It's what?
Way less than that.
Way less than that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would actually get less than 2% of people that would actually file on a given year?
Over 3,000 properties.
There's 3475 properties.
3475.
Maybe 150 people?
That was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
That was pre-COVID. Post-COVID, since we haven't done a reval, we had 56 last year. So,
Would you anticipate, only reason I bring it up, would you anticipate that this year it would be a more substantial, could double or
Yes.
more?
I expect more people to come in this year.
Okay. Can we handle all that with what we have in the department to be able to handle? When you handle an appeal, is an appeal something that, just that, because I have no idea, is this something that you can solve in 3 hours a day, or?
Oh,
is it-
no, yeah, no, it's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
And we can be at computers,
Okay.
looking at comps and really having a fruitful conversation in the moment
Yes.
with somebody.
Okay.
If you can come to an agreement, terrific, but sometimes you have to agree to disagree, and there's still an appeals process. There's always another level
Okay.
the
Right.
taxpayer can
Yep.
be
Okay.
expected to.
I'll just add that since because of the need to do these assessment disclosure notices, the town will have that informal review period. So hopefully that'll serve as a way to, let's say, identify issues that can be taken care of ahead of grievance. Property owners, even if they get a reduction, they still have the right to file a grievance. But hopefully that might help mitigate some of the folks who might otherwise just go directly to grievance.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, your point about commercial properties is spot on. There's really nothing I can say to it. You're absolutely right. In a community like Shelter Island, the vast majority of the town's values is in residential. So of course, it stands to reason that the bulk of the tax burden will fall on the residential properties. I mean, the only thing I can add is that assuming the town goes back to maintaining 100%, when the market changes, those market changes will be captured in the assessments. So if at some point the market does start to go down, people's assessments will decrease too. Now, that's probably not going to change their taxes. Again, it's that old issue that if assessments go down across the board, excuse me, because there's been a decrease in the market, unless the taxing jurisdictions say, well, we don't need to collect as many taxes, yeah, you're probably not going to see much of a change in the bill.
Yeah.
But the basis for distributing the tax will be fair. It'll reflect the correct value.
It's just a thing in the back of my mind, 114 is our main corridor, and a lot of stores are empty, and, if we could build up our commercial properties and build up 114 a little bit, traffic is getting, ferry prices are ferry prices and traffic is traffic and elderly people, getting off the island. So, I know people don't like to see the island build up at all, but love to see that the commercial, 114, we kind of maximized a little bit, in terms of bringing needed services to the island so that people wouldn't have to travel off island. And it would help in terms of our tax rate by having a little bit more burden with the commercial properties that, would be along 114. So, I just think for whatever it's worth, it should be something that we look towards.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'll talk briefly about the data mailer that we'll be distributing. I'm going to have it on the website for taxpayers to print out and fill out online or on the website. And then they can also fill it out on the website, I believe. I'll double check, but I'm fairly certain we can do it that way. And I will also be mailing it to all taxpayers. Everyone will receive one in the mail. Please fill it out. It'll have all the different specifications about your property, specific information pertaining to what we have on file for your property. A number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, whether you have a deck, you have a pool, tennis court, things like that. Whatever you may have on your property that would bring value.
Mhm.
So I would love everyone to carefully look at it, make sure we have everything as correct as possible, because know that you will be assessed on those improvements and specifications.
Great. When are you going to do that, Judith?
I'm hoping to get that done by September 1st at the absolute latest.
Okay, great.
So you should be receiving it, I'm hopeful, for the next 2 weeks. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I have a pretty good understanding of it all now. I appreciate.
Very good, John. And when we do the budget presentation, we'll correlate this discussion.
Yeah, that'll be the tricky part.
Right. BJ, you good?
I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is a discussion on the community housing, the preferences. The purpose of this local law is to try and ensure that our fire department and EMS service continue to have volunteers by giving top preference to first responders in the provision of community housing opportunities. This goes back to Southold that put in place some provisions to put emergency service volunteers at the top of the line for eligibility for housing. I think we test Stephen with the fact that, number one, make sure, we would like to do the same, but make sure it's bulletproof as it could be, that it follows the letter of the law as far as fair housing. And I think one of the other things we want to look into is, since this is community housing, how else can we open it up to, initially we had talked about, housing for, families that live here already, possibly that work here, school teachers, policemen, ferry workers. So I don't know, how deep we want to get into that part of it today, but just the whole concept, where we were told fair housing is you can't put any restrictions on it. Now we're kind of hearing otherwise, Stephen.
Yeah, so as you referenced, Southold got a lot of press for giving preferences to first responders. The only amendment that they effectuated was to change their findings that say, preference will be given. They didn't make any mechanical changes, so there's no substantive provision to show how it's going to be done. So what I did was, we have a pre-existing section in our code, it's 51-7, entitled Housing Registry. And it gives priorities for certain people when community housing opportunities come up. And what I love about it, it's qualified by saying, to the extent permitted by law and federal, state, and county programs, then you could do these priorities. So we have a little bit of a fail-safe there. So it's I can't tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that any of these preferences will survive constitutional scrutiny. Or, so, it is what it is. But I'm confident that with the first responders, that we have a much better case. So just to run down what's in existence right now, in 51-7C lists the priorities. So if we don't make this amendment right now, the top priority is someone who currently lives and works for at least a year on Shelter Island. And the second priority would be someone who lives and doesn't work on Shelter Island for at least a year. Third priority would be someone who's currently employed for at least a year on Shelter Island. Then you get into people that previously lived on Shelter Island for at least a year, and then all others. So what I want to do with this amendment is make the top priority a first responder. Because when you look at how courts, view these local preferences, they look at it through the lens of whether there's a disparate impact on a protected class. So a disparate impact is just a different impact. That's what disparate means. So in 2015, the Supreme Court rendered a decision in Inclusive Communities, that was the name of the case, and created a local preference test. So it's a three-step test. First, the plaintiff would have to show that the town's preference system causes greater harm to a protected class than others. So again, demographically, we're more of a white island than a minority island. So there's more white individuals will get necessarily priorities based on demographics. So they would probably be able to meet that burden. But then the burden goes to the town, and the town must prove that our first responder preference is necessary to achieve a valid interest. And in this step, I think we do have a very valid interest. The valid interest is we're not going to be able to field the volunteer fire department because they can't afford to live here. So, but then, the plaintiff would have another bite at the apple and say, be that as it may, here's another alternative that the town could employ. But I don't see what another alternative is. If people can't afford to live here that provide those services, we're not going to have them. We're an island. But the valid interest, which is, we're not going to be able to have a fire department, can't just be speculative or hypothetical. It has to be grounded in data, which I'm sure we can.
Average age of 58.
Correct. And average home price.
Yeah.
And maybe even get into what is the income of the fire department right now, and whether or not that's going to correlate with new members coming in. So I think, if we impose such a priority, like I said, I think we have a strong case. I can't guarantee it. But also we're a very unique situation as well, being an island, that we might be able to survive any scrutiny of those other priorities as well. But
I want to stay with valid interest. Can we for a minute?
yes,
So valid interest, to me, that would also speak to the police department and the highway department. Bad things happen at night, usually 2 a.m. And so highway department living in Southold or further, problem. I mean, we need them here, and police department especially. I mean, again, by the time you get here from wherever you might live off island, tick tock. So I understand that first responders are typically EMS and fire, but would there be, I think it's easy to show valid interest for those 2 other classes.
no, absolutely. And then the same could be said possibly of teachers.
I
know there's not that
less of an
emergency component,
yeah,
but also if you don't have teachers, you're not going to have a school. You
Right,
need teachers.
right, right.
The children have to be educated.
yeah.
So, but there is, they could come back with the alternative of, go to other schools. But
Yeah.
you make a compelling case
Yeah.
right there as far as, highway. But then, also in our code, we have a requirement that town employees have full-time residency, subject to certain exemptions.
Yeah, that too.
So
They would be waiving that out of necessity.
Yeah, because we don't have a pool here.
The chief wants to say something. Chief?
Oh, sorry.
No, Supervisor, I just wanted to build on what Councilwoman Ianfola had to say, was that maybe, Stephen, there's some merit in having two classes of first responders, having a volunteer class and then having a paid class. And even as we look at our first responders, whether it be police, fire, EMS, and or highway, there is some evolution to them being paid at some point, but we still need their services. And we need them on the island as much as we can avail them on the island, especially for call-out purposes. So I do think if there was a way to do that, Stephen, where you could have a volunteer class of first responders and then a paid class, because even with pensions and there's other things that fall into those classes now, we could make a strong argument. We have a real need to have first responders on the island, whether paid or volunteer. And at the rate of housing in our community, if an average house is $1 million, even with the salaries we pay the police department now, it's unaffordable, it's unattainable.
No, totally agree. And that's a fight, I'd be willing to fight in court. So
What do you think about that two class? I guess you gotta examine that.
instead of two classes, maybe we just, the top priority is the volunteer, and then right below that, the next priority is the paid.
Yeah.
So we just break it down that way. But yeah, I can work on that and come back with another draft for your review. Is that something you want to explore, expanding?
There's no doubt about it. I think it's got to be fair, it's got to be balanced, it's got to be legal, but it's got to be all those things. And I do think there are other services other than just the four that we mentioned, and teaching. I think there are essential services that we need here on the island also. We do need another whole segment of housing for young people that are working here on the island, providing vital services, electricians, plumbers, and things of that nature. We do need to take care of that group as well.
Okay. That's good.
Steven, should we propose this to the housing committee and get their input, or?
The town.
Well, with a new edit, yeah, I think it should go to them, just for opinion.
Yeah.
Advice.
Input. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Have Liz come to the next available, do we know, when do they meet again?
The 14th of September.
Oh, ooh.
I think this is a
We can get
very
this.
important area for housing.
You can email
Probably
them and request comment that way.
Oh, let's do that, once you have a new edit.
it could be the most important thing about housing, about who's getting it and how it's prioritized. So I think the more input you get from everyone on this subject area, the better I like it. And I don't want it coming from the 5 current town board members. I think we have a say. We represent, a lot of people out there that probably have strong feelings about this. But I think if it's explained to them properly, I just would like to have greater support, a greater base of people that are behind this housing effort and recognize the fact that this is so much needed. I think it helps in a lot of efforts, but I think they should be part of the process too.
No, absolutely. And then, when we have to articulate the valid interests, that's helpful as far as they can be tasked maybe with statistical evidence, and because, we know it's an issue, but it's, again, anecdotal, or it's like, we need hard evidence, empirical evidence. So again, housing prices versus salaries versus, and age, and I need hard data. So we're gonna have to come up with that.
Okay, but that's not for the law, that's to defend the law should we be challenged.
Correct.
But you need it
Correct.
contemporaneously.
Yeah, I would love to do it concurrently. But I think we're in a much stronger position than our current priority system is, going with the emergency services, first responders, indispensable.
I think it's got to be attacked on a number of fronts, and I think this is an important one. But I think the real shock came from all of us when Phil Powers retired. When he retired, And the way that that created, first it was $100,000 or plus, now it's $200,000 plus, the credentials that he had. So we do have people on the island that are, and EMS is doing a great job of recruiting and hopefully retaining. But we do need people with higher certifications that already live here on the island that don't need housing. But we should be putting a carrot out there for those people to take those higher level courses and make it worth their while. We don't have to give them housing. They already have housing here. But whether it's tax breaks or incentives, some types of incentives to go out there, pursue these things, because we do need highly qualified people in EMS. It's not just a body, it's somebody who's.
In our, Megan, going around to HOAs and the fire department, fire district so far, we'll get to the fire department. We've gotten comments about this and what could we do? And just a great suggestion, which is in EMS, every level of training that you go up, that you increase your certification, we actually pay an annual stipend for that, for you staying active and maintaining that and then increasing that. As a town, it's a lot less money than hiring and paying benefits, et cetera, a stipend. And in the fire department, the load on the officers is much greater than the ordinary seaman, I was gonna say ordinary firemen. And again, maybe the town, it's in our interest to think about paying a stipend to people who take that extra burden on, which means they're working less hours somewhere else. Or less with their families, but a lot of people on this island have two jobs, especially in the summer, or one job that they work a lot of hours at. And so when they take that responsibility on, again, it's in our interest to make that attractive.
Yeah.
So something we can think about in addition, I know we're
Good.
off topic here a little bit,
No,
but
but it's, you
yeah,
have to have a multi-pronged approach with all of this.
yeah.
All right, so I'm thinking I will expand the definition of first responder. And then also, either we include police in that one and make them a top priority, or we have volunteer first responders versus first responders. And then we can talk about like a category of essential government employees, highway department, whatever, and then non-essential employees are like fourth. And maybe we start there.
Okay. Let's see that. And if there's any place else in New York State that's sort of tried this, I don't know.
I've been researching, it's
We
not.
haven't seen anything like
no.
that yet.
Thank you.
I'm good, yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Okay, next on the list, last week we closed the hearing on the, oh, I'm sorry, yes, about this?
Yeah,
go. Yeah.
Two quick things, Bill Mashburn for the record. I think it would be great if Stephen could come to the community housing next meeting for an iterative discussion, because I think there are more questions than he would just ask here. I'd ask one that you might know now, which is when you've looked into the research of other cases, when there has been litigation, have there been injunctions that have stopped the process, or do the people get their houses and then there's something later on?
It's typically injunctions. It stops the
That would
process.
stop the process.
Like, for instance, in Oyster Bay, there was developments that was supposed to go on. They were stopped from building. And they weren't able to effectuate the program.
I'm asking that because that, I think, is kind of imperative towards the beginning of what we are doing. And since we will only have a few homes for rental, hopefully relatively soon, at the last Community Housing Committee meeting, we had a bit of a discussion, no decisions or anything. Would it make sense, even though everyone would like to do something like that, since we are somewhat self-selective as an island, that you're not, hopefully not going to get a lot from outside the island, so that you can get something done quickly, not to do it right away, but to look to do it more towards the future.
No, well,
You hear what I'm saying?
No, I hear you, but right now in our code, we have a priority system that doesn't value the first responder.
No, I don't.
So that's gonna be,
I totally agree.
so we're gonna get, we could
Change the
get,
code.
no, but we can get challenged on that anyway.
That's true, yeah.
So I think I'd rather get challenged in a stronger position with this one.
That's why I think an iterative conversation would be helpful. Thanks for.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay, so next on the list, we closed the application to be heard regarding the moratorium exemption for one pending. Amber asked if we could hold it off a week because she left, wasn't feeling well. She has very strong feelings on this.
I know, I'd like to hear her, I'd like to hear her.
That's fine
argument.
with me. We can put it off a week. I don't mind.
I'm fine. Okay, that's it on the actual agenda. We'll go around the table. Meg?
All right, so I'm gonna start out with comp plan. We have the virtual public meeting on Thursday at 7 o'clock. You can zoom in, the link is on the town website. It's on the very first page at the top. It's only zoom in, yes, it's all on Zoom, it's all virtual. And so what it's gonna be is a presentation by the consultants, giving you an outline of the plan, some of the major findings, and then some of the possible action items or topics that, will be action items. So there'll be that presentation, and once we have that presentation, we will post it online for everyone to look at before the actual virtual meeting. We're hoping to have it tomorrow for posting. So then what we'll do is they'll go through their presentation, and then everybody in the Zoom will be broken out into smaller groups, and we'll have maybe 4.
Depending on the number.
Depending on how many people show up, maybe 3 or 4 different breakout groups. 5 if we get super lucky. And so then in each small group, the small groups will have discussions on the presentation, the different topics that were presented, the different concepts and ideas that were shown to everybody, so that we can kind of get an idea of what the public thinks about, the chapters, topics, and just generally their feeling of the process on the island and kind of the ideas that are being presented. And then whoever is the moderator for that group will be taking notes, and then all the small groups will come back into one big group, and each moderator for the group will explain the discussion that they had in their group. So then they'll just kind of be an unbiased reporter on the conversation. So it'll all be recorded, and it'll all be uploaded later after it's processed. And so we're really hoping we get a nice big turnout for that. We did send out emails to all the presidents of all the HOAs and the civic organizations and the churches and everybody. I sent everybody an email saying, hey, this is coming, share this with your group, share this with your organization. So I'm hoping that we get a very big turnout for it. It's sort of kind of re-engaging the public. It's been such a long process, and so much of it has been with the CPAC kind of collecting information. We engage with the public in the beginning, and then in the middle, we tried to keep them engaged, but it's such a long process that people start to kind of lose interest or drift out and get distracted. And now that the consultants are on board and they're working with us and we have their expertise, we really want to re-engage the public and get everybody back involved, because we're going to have a draft of the total document by September. So I would really like to get as much input now and get people started to get engaged again. And that's kind of why BJ and I have been going around to all the HOAs and meeting with everyone, letting them know that this process is happening. We want you to be involved. And just getting some basic understanding of what the needs are of each neighborhood that we go to make sure that.
Sort of unfiltered.
Yeah.
Raw data.
Well, unfiltered and unguided.
Yeah.
We're really having an open discussion. We're not trying to drive the conversation. Each meeting we go to, it's very open-ended. We say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're working on this comprehensive plan. It's a guiding document for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So what we want to know from you is, what are the needs of your community? What are your concerns? What are your challenges? What do you like about it? What do you want to see change? What do you want to stay the same? And then we really just let the community talk to us. And it's been great because there really are different needs in each area of the island. So we're continuing that. We still have some open meeting dates that we're hoping get filled soon. And then, after this virtual meeting, we're going to take the commentary from that, and the consultants are going to kind of finalize the draft document and hopefully get it out to everyone by September 15th at the latest is what we've been promised. So hopefully sooner. Because then, on September 23rd, which is a Saturday, we're going to have an open house over at the community center above the Legion with all of the chapters on billboards, with all the action items outlined so that people can come and read them and talk to the consultants, talk to the CPAC, talk to the task force, give us feedback, give us notes, give us ideas, and hopefully we'll get, and it'll be open for a long period of time, like from 10 to 5 or something like that. We're going to have the whole day open on a Saturday so people can come at their leisure. So there's no real restriction on, time, and it hopefully won't conflict with people's jobs. And hopefully that way we get more engagement, more feedback. People can really take their time and go over it and ask questions. And then the consultants will take that information back and also the information from the CPAC at that point and revise the draft one more time before then representing it. And then at some point it will go from being a community and CPAC with all the edits to a more final draft that will go to the town board. And so once the consultants present it to the town board, then it starts a formal hearing process, a formal public hearing process. And so that's really where you do all the polishing and the finalizing of the concepts. And so that's kind of our next, few months, 3-4 months. But things to keep an open mind for are this virtual meeting on Thursday. And then in September, we're going to get the draft and then this nice open house. So I really hope everybody tunes in because it's going to be, I think it's going to be fun.
Okay, just so the public understands the process. Once we're ready to go to public hearing, that's with the completed plan that's ready to present. And then we go to public hearing, public to comment on.
Yep.
And the town board listens, responds, eventually closes the public hearing.
Yep.
Then what?
Well, if SECRA is completed, once the process is finished, so once you have SECRA review completed, once you have the public hearings completed and you're not getting any new information, everything seems like it's reached a completion, then the board would approve it. So, we're coming down to the end of the process. And, we don't have a full draft yet because the consultants are still working on some of the more complicated parts. And so, we're not rushing them. We want them to do the job that we hired them to do. And it's a lot. We gave them a lot of information. A lot of it we had done before they got on board. So we were able to literally hand it off the same day they signed the contract and said, here, get started. And they did. But some of the more complicated chapters we had held up to the end because we knew we needed consultants' help. So with the, economic development chapter, the land use and zoning chapter, and some of like the demographics chapter really needed the consultants and their resources because they have resources that we don't have. And so they've been working on those because they really do kind of set the pace for a lot of the document. And we want to make sure it's done correctly. Like this is us trying to go through the land use and zoning to figure out what our actual zoning is, because all of these maps are slightly different and GIS is slightly different. So we're trying to figure out what is the official zoning map that the town is using so that they have it correct. Because when they did the presentation for the town, the zoning map they were looking at didn't have Bridge Street as B zoned. So they were thinking, well, that's completely non-compliant with the usage, the current usage. So there was confusion there because they're like, well, if it's a full business street, it should be B zoned, but they're looking at a map that shows it as AA.
Right.
But it is
So, but it is B. So, we've corrected that. So of course now you don't have to change the zoning on Bridge Street because it's already B zoned. So just trying to get all of the data accurate for them is what BJ and I have been doing. We've been going to the assessor's office, going to the building department, trying to fill it all in. And so I think it'll be good. They should hopefully have some of the zoning recommendations ready for the presentation on Thursday. So those will hopefully have out to everyone tomorrow so they can read through it and preview it. we got a question last night on, why do we need to update the comprehensive plan? 94 was a good plan. And 94 was a good plan, but 94 was 30 years ago. I look at it and I think, okay, well, where was I 30 years ago? I was 10. So a lot's happened in 30 years. And so just in reviewing, I went through and I was like, okay, well, let's see, how accurate is it? What's it missing? There have been some significant changes since 1994. If they started this in 92, 93. So just the Natural Resources chapter. In 1992, Peconic Bay was just added to the National Estuary Program. So that doesn't include anything that's happened since then. It doesn't include the Peconic Estuary Partnership. It doesn't include all of the studies that have been done on brown tide. And this brown tide was just new, and
Correct.
literally the hopes run high that we can figure out how to fix this. Okay, but now we have solutions. We have studies done. We have Cornell Cooperative working on it. We have the Peconic Estuary Partnership. Suffolk County did a huge water study in 2020 and in 2015 and figured out what the possible solutions are. So none of that is included in this comprehensive plan. And then, in 1992, the WMAC, the Waterways Management Advisory Council, was just created, and so there's so many things missing. It doesn't include CPF at all. And CPF has had a major impact on the island. It's had a major impact on Suffolk County. So to not have some of these more prominent legislations included is really lacking. It makes it outdated.
I have to say, recommendations, we all know the action items are key. This is key, right? But the bulk of the plan, of a comp plan, is existing conditions. It's to say where you're starting from. So how do you update 1994? You don't update it. You update it, but it winds up being a whole new plan because so much has changed. You just can't, X out 2,000 year-rounders and put in 3,000 year-rounders. You kind of have to state where it came from. You kind of have to show what happened in between. It was kind of, I get, it was a good plan,
It gets right down to the bottom line. I think people, what was wrong with 1994? What was wrong with 1974? Let's go back to 1954. People want to go back to the way Shelter Island was 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's changing. Every community in the world has changed, and it is changing. You need a plan that stays with it's reality, folks. It's sitting, whatever better that you're on top of it and keeping it current. The other thing is, even when you adopt this document, whether you adopt it in 2023 or 2024, but hopefully 2033, but it's a living document. It should be worked on annually. It should be looked at every day. It's something that you shouldn't be waiting 10 years to update it again. It should be tweaked as you move forward.
Right.
This is the guideline. This is what's going to dictate decision-making, expenditures, and priorities, and everything else for the future. You can't live in the past. We're in the present, but this plan takes you to the future. It's that simple.
Right. Well, and we did use the 1994 plan. We looked at this, we looked at 2008, and I went through the implementation actions just for the natural resources one, and 50% of these have already been completed. There's no need to carry them over. There are some that are still going on, and there are some actions that we did carry over. So explore the participation in the New York State Local Waterfront Revitalization Program. That's an action item that we've carried over, but it's also an enormous undertaking. It's a very expensive and very time-consuming process, but it may benefit us. So we carried that over because at some point it may be something that we need to tackle, and then mark all town landings as public landings and assure that the public has access. Okay, well, we just finished the Shoreline Access Task Force. So now implementing their recommendations needs to be in the new plan. So much of this we've addressed and it's done, or it's something that is ongoing that we have incorporated into the new plan. So we didn't throw out 94. We're not ignoring it, but there are some critical elements that have not been included in this because they were created after.
They didn't exist.
And so it is a really great foundation, and it's definitely something that we took into account, but it is 30 years old and it does need a reboot. So just, to answer that question as to why, and I can go through and I can do every chapter like I did the waterways one, but that was just the first one in the plan. All right, what else do we have? So the craft fair and the Green Expo are this Saturday, the 26th, from 11 to 3. Comp plan will have a table there. All of the town committees, the CAC, the Green Options, the WQI, the Water Advisory Committee, the Deer and Tick Committee, they're all going to have tables. They're all going to have information and handouts for people. And
Correct.
We would love to see you there. It's going to be a wealth of information.
Be behind the school.
We'll be behind the school between the tennis courts and the playground up on the high part. The parking's down by the tennis courts. So please come. It'll be a lot of fun. At least I think it's fun. I enjoy it. I've enjoyed it every year, even when I'm roasting out on the lawn. And then we are continuing, BJ and I are continuing to meet with the different community organizations and homeowners associations. So we've been busy bees, but that's what I've been up to.
All right, thank you. Jim, it'll be a busy week. Friday of this week on August 25th at 7 p.m. at the library across the street. We have Dr. Kadaris, who's the expert on the impact of technology on children and adults as well, but he's a world-renowned Harvard study, Stony Brook University professor, genius when it comes to this. I've listened to him for an hour and a half program interviewed on television. It's startling. It's a little frightening at times because of the physiological impact that it does have on young people's children's brains. I mean, it actually does impact them. And it can have a positive impact when used properly, and when abused for long periods of time and for certain types of programs, it can be very detrimental to the mental health and the emotional health of a child who is growing up. So if you're available, it's available on Zoom. It will be available in person. I would suggest that you visit Shelter Island Library website. If you're going to plan on being there in person, maximum number of people, I believe, is 75. So I think the room will be filled. So if you have plans on physically being there, you should register to be there. The school will be represented. Superintendent and some of the faculty members will be there. Other East End school districts will be represented. Our place I have coming. We have several libraries, East End libraries, that'll be represented there at this function. Should be pretty good. And there'll be a question and answer period at the end. So anybody that might have any questions, if you're a grandparent, you're concerned about your grandchildren, which I obviously am every time I come down in the morning, and they're down there on these little things, and they don't say, "Good morning, Grandpa." It's like, hello? Nothing. No, I mean, they're locked in. It's sometimes, a little disturbing at 6:30 in the morning when you expect, "Good morning, how are you?" A little friendly way to start the day. Anyhow, we'd like to put you in touch with the Legion's this will be, I guess, our second or third annual. On September 2nd, we're having the Legion Barbecue. There are 9 teams. Every team will be issued a 20-pound pork butt, whatever that means, butt. 125-pound pig will be roasted. We'll have loads of chickens that are going to be roasted. It's $45 the event. You can spend $55 if you want to go downstairs for an after party with a cash bar. And then we'll also have music, a band, and things of that nature. Thank you to the fire department that's helping us immensely with the tables and chairs. Thank you to the South Ferry that's helping us with a tent. And last year, I think we had about 300 tickets sold. This year, we anticipate that we'll get to that amount. We'll be setting up on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock on the 2nd and tearing down on Sunday morning. But we do have we talked about it last night at the Legion meeting, so that's kind of important. The last thing I want to tell you about is that we also talked about 3 other things. The men's bathroom will be probably completed this week downstairs, and the old bathroom was, it was in bad shape. It needed a facelift. The women's bathroom is a winter project. We thought we could get them both done in the summer. We couldn't physically do it. So we are going to use the men's bathroom, so both men and women, and we will rip out the women's bathroom and work on that, update that. The other thing that we're looking to do is to absolutely replace the 2 bowling alleys and the machines. They are really on the way out. It'll be a very expensive proposition, probably north of about $150,000 to be able to do this. But we are working on raffles to help us get to that end. And the other thing we talked about a little bit about is ADA compliance. Well, the upstairs will be, we'll have this function available upstairs and hopefully with nice weather outside as well. But getting downstairs to the Legion right now, there's only 2 ways to get down there. It's via the stairs, which we had a gentleman last night who's in his 90s, early 90s, and he talked about the danger of walking down those concrete stairs, or the chairlift that is provided, in the front of the building that you can take the chairlift down. So I would like to discuss that eventually with the capital planning group to maybe look at maybe improving ways in which we can get people, up and down those stairs. Hold on. All right, so that should be it on that. Oh, I would like to remind everybody that the wait tomorrow, right, is from 4 to 7 o'clock for Supervisor Jim Doherty. Obviously sat in this table with him for 2 years, and he's a tough guy. He's a politician, and he's a tough guy, but he loved a good argument, bright, articulate, very much cared about CPF properties and cared very much about preserving those properties, big on environment, initiated some real good things during his 10 years as supervisor. After he left the supervisor role, I had the opportunity to play tennis with the guy, and he begs in those 30 years, I'm still older than that. But playing with the guy, Dick Berkey was his very good friend. And Dick and Jim were like brothers. And going over there, it was always a scream to go over there and play. Guys were, both of them were very good tennis players. Dick is, has a couple of physical ailments that prevents him from getting out there and playing. And Jim, hey, got to take my hat off to the guy on stage 2 weeks ago at the musical there, and you guys were there and you witnessed it. And I said to Margaret when we were about to leave, I said, I have to say something to Mr. Doherty. And he came off the stage, I went up to him and I said, listen, I know he was fighting his 3rd round with, I think it was leukemia or lymphoma, I think he had some type, and had come back, and he was very frail. And I said, I give you a lot of credit for getting up there. I really do. I mean, it wasn't a big part in the musical, but the fact is that he loved serving this community, and he liked being up on stage, and more power to him. So we'll miss him in the blue sports car going up and down. It could be almost snowing, but that top would be down and he'd be zooming around town. So hats off to Jim. Just wanted to say that. And last, I just have a couple comments on Deer and Tick Committee meeting. Several things in particular. The graphs clearly show, and I'm going to talk to you, show you, did the 4 posters work? Well, we've been collecting data on Lone Star nymphs since 2008. So that goes back, quite a few years. Before the 4 poster, by the way, came into existence with Cornell with the 60 units from 2008 to 2010. We had 12 sites. We averaged 440 nymphs per site. There were 5,281 to be exact. Following year, first year of the four-poster, went from 440 to 158. Next year, went from 458, same 12 stations, same 12 spots, went from 158 to 18. It had dropped from 440 to 18. During the four-poster, then the four-poster was over in 2010. We took them off the island. Remember, we took them all out of Neshomick and we had a hiatus in 2011. It immediately tripled, went back up to 57. We brought them back in 2012, dropped to 11, 27, 12, 26, 35, 31, 20, 15, 18. Then we stopped with the four-poster in 2021. 82, 74, 136 per site. This year, 227 average per site. I'm just showing you that the data doesn't lie. The situation is alive and well, and that's the reason why we keep this data, and Bo does a great job in doing that. So I just wanted, we go to the pharmacy, we have records that go from 2006 to 2022 on Doxy RXs, but Doxy is used more than just for Lyme disease, it's used for other things. But we have relatively, kept, in 2022, last year, there were 536 prescriptions for Doxy filled by the Shelter Island Pharmacy. I want to tell you a vast majority of them are for tick illness. That's 536 prescriptions. We also have data on other vaccines that are used for other types of tick-borne illness that we have kept that I could share with you. The chairman's report, Dr. Bevilacqua, invasive plant species discussion. He's in contact with Howard from the CAC, Dan from the CAC, Tim Pertel, Green Options, Gordon Gooding from the CPF, and to form a committee that will examine and develop a plan to better maintain some of the trails that are utilized for hiking and on various CPF properties and town properties. So obviously that's something that's going to happen in the near future. Future of the four-poster. Jim stated that the future of trying to reinstate the four-poster will be dictated by the collection of data and the incidence of tick-borne illness. So we are obviously, the state, if we can get the trends documented and say, listen, it had a direct relationship here, so maybe that'll help. Jim talked about the ethics committee, and last but not least, I had the liaison report, and I proposed in my position as liaison to the committee for the 2024 budget. We are not doing a flyover for the fourth year. We've dispensed with the flyover. That's a $26,000 item. I would like to see some of those monies dispensed in the following way. Tick habitat management. So there is tremendous evidence that shows you by managing invasive plants, it helps in terms of tick reduction. It also helps hunters hunt. When you're going into the woods in October, November, when tick season is still alive and well, walking through all of this debris is tough for the hunter. It also helps in deer recovery because you can take your vehicle in there to recover the carcass of a deer. So, it helps in hiker access. So when we talk about managing of the trails, we're talking about lots of good benefits to being able to do that. The second thing is basic archery training. I think Julia has shown us that, Weissenberg, that her efforts are starting to pay off. We've gotten young people, getting some older people, getting involved in basic archery. The sport is coming back. We hope that some of these people will in fact become future recreational hunters here on Shelter Island. Education speaks for itself. That prong of the Deer and Tick Committee is extremely important now more than ever. And my last thing that I said to them is NUCO incentives. We always talk about incentives here. Additional money is available to help provide incentives to gain NUCO certification. It's a process. You don't just go out and just apply for it. You have to be certified for it. It does cost them some money. I would like to thank, last year, our biggest problem was 4 new codes. We really only had 3. We only had 2.25 actually in the field for the months of February and March. If we don't hit hard in February and March, going after our deer herd is going to stay as is or increase. So we saw it go down to 700. We saw it go back up to 800. It's now somewhere between 800 and 900. Now that the fawns are back on, it's probably higher than that. But we have to make an effort. Not looking, and I want to remind everybody, we're not looking to go to 0. We're looking to try to take that original estimated number of 1,400 or 1,500, cut it in half, get it down to 750 or 700, and then be able to maintain it. And then have future boards make evaluation on whether they would like to get the herd down slightly lower. It still will be 5 times above what the DEC recommends, which is 8 to 10 per square mile. Just ride around at night at dusk. Went out last night, walked with my son. The deer all over Silver Beach. The numbers are starting to increase again. There's just no doubt about it. So that's kind of the report. And hopefully when budget time comes up, hopefully the board will be supportive of trying to help in those 4 different areas. I think it's important, since we don't have the 4-poster, to redirect some of our money, our finances, and our efforts in other ways. Thank you.
BJ?
Nothing.
Okay, Stephen?
I just want to make a couple of points. Comprehensive plan update. In the original comprehensive plan, it says, this is not the study to end all studies, but rather has made clear how much additional study would be helpful. So, contemplating being updated. And then also New York State law requires periodic review. It says the town board shall provide, as a component of such proposed comprehensive plan, the maximum intervals at which the adopted plan shall be reviewed. So we just want to, I didn't see it in there specifically, but I think in the new one, we should have, I think you have to put like 5 years or 10 years for mandatory. Okay.
For review every 5 years, but it's trying to create a more of a living document. So it'll give guidance on how town boards should reference it when creating legislation. So using it as more of a guiding document. So let's say, of course, the comprehensive plan can't cover any and all circumstance that we may encounter in the future. But you should be able to find guidance for it and how to approach a situation or how the community felt about a certain topic. So for example, trees. We're getting a lot of input from the community that they want some guidance when it comes to clear cutting. They don't want clear cutting. So the recommendation is to create some kind of code amendment that regulates how much of a lot you can clear for new construction. And that's just something that, people have been giving us. But, there may be something that comes up that, the comprehensive plan didn't think of. But for most of it, it should be a document that you can say, well, the town can look at it while they're looking at their legislation and say, well, this is sort of the recommendation that was made.
We'll be on that right after Labor Day. The committee will meet, and we shall have a series of meetings, probably come back with a recommendation to the town board.
And just again, to make it crystal clear, it should have been updated a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Okay, I got a couple of things. One, we'd like to have a sort of an open house, get people over to the property, Charlie Murray property, to look at it. I was hoping to do it either Saturday, September 9th, or Saturday, September 16th, before the get together at the community center for the comprehensive plan, so people might, be able to talk about it then. So we'll advertise when it's going to be. Darren asked if we could just hold off till he cleans it a little more, so that it's a little more presentable. And what we're looking at is the town's looking at possibly purchasing the property for use as a fitness center, possibly for housing, possibly for a senior center, possibly for future use, a number of other things. So we'll give you the date on that. Say it's either going to be September 9th or September 16th.
And you're going morning or afternoon?
I don't know, we'll have to decide.
Yeah, the Longport Diner cruise is on the 16th at 4 PM.
Oh, yeah, it'll be early.
Just
Yeah,
throw
yeah.
that out.
Okay, and the other thing is, I apologize, I didn't open the meeting with the moment of silence for Jim Doherty. So I'll end it with that, but before I do, I just want to say something about Jim. Tomorrow at the service, I'm sure a number of people will talk about Jim as a supervisor. I'd like to talk about Jim a little more personal. Jim reached out to me when I was sick, and I had to go into the city a number of times. And he offered me the use of his apartment, which was pretty incredible. And I'll always remember that. But more important, I'll always remember Jim sitting up on Tuts Hill with Nancy and how he took care of her. And I just always admired that. And as fate would have it, I was in the same position with Ronnie. And I always remembered how Jim took care of Nancy. And it was like an inspiration for me to do the same. So I'll let other people speak to Jim as a supervisor. I'll just speak to him as a man, and I really did admire him. So with that said, we'll open it up to the public for comments, and then we'll have a moment of silence. Anybody in the audience? Anybody in the Zoom audience? Okay, so if you just join me for a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. And again, the service tomorrow is from 4 to 7, and Thursday, the funeral is for the family. Tomorrow, it's at the community center, yes. Okay, now I need to make a motion. We go into executive session to discuss a contract.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Everybody